Objectively, if you're an ogre and you're in the realm of Nurgle, everything sucks. It's all green, it's all gross, and you can't find a bite to eat anywhere. Unless your name is Greasus and you use lesser demons to spice up your 30-pound drumsticks. But Ku'gath Plaguefather makes the Over Tyrant look like a bulimic high schooler. He is one big chungus, and he is an absolute terror in some multiplayer matchups right now. It's the survival of the fattest, as the two biggest blubberbutts in all of Mortal Empires clash in the Rotfather's favorite swamps. Mr. Steel Yo Victuals, the shockingly obese, is leading the Ogre army, and he received a few buffs in patch 1.2. It's been underwhelming for quite some time, but in matchups where the enemy force has to fight him in melee, he can do okay or even quite well. And the biggest changes he got were a boost to AP damage, a price reduction on Horde Master, and his Over Tyrant's Crown, doubling its ward save from 5 to 10% in an AoE. Scepter of Titans makes him a decent duelist, and we'll take a look and see if he can beat Mighty Ku'gath in a contest of whose chair is more pimpin'. Out front is the new ROR for the Ogres, the Powder Guts, an incredible man-eater unit that are essentially super elite, almost unbreakable, have higher range and damage output with their pistols, and a crazy ability called Adaptive Tactics that gets their MA and MD up into the 70s when they're losing combat. So as long as they aren't being shot, they will hold the line longer than pretty much anything, because 70 melee defense just doesn't exist elsewhere in Mortal Empires. Even against halberds, they'll hold. For the caster, got a Fire Belly, almost fully kitted out with Flame Incarnate, Breath Attacks, and Eruption, Fireball, Flaming Sword of Ruin, and Piercing Bolts of Burning, stacking that Rag Banner with the Crown to create pretty much a high morale center that will fight to the end. Other than that, bunch of Noblars, few Noblar Trappers for their Tricksy Traps, dual up in Ogre Bulls, and the Iron Blaster, which isn't quite as effective at sniping enemy lords from across the map anymore, but will still devastate units from closer ranges. Plague Drones with Death's Heads are a finicky unit. You don't want to be using their bioweapons from max range, but if you can perch atop a target and fire straight down at them, they can rack up some awesome damage for some important monsters and characters. Just remember, they aren't really using grenades, they're more like AP javelins, so throwing in a chaff is an utter waste, and frankly, maybe that design is a bit counterintuitive based on what they are in the lore. Slowly, steadily, come marching up the hill is the Fetid Brewmaster leading a Noxious host, supported by two Beasts of Nurgle and the Festering Stooges, which might very well be the best new ROR in patch 1.2. Very good infantry unit, incredibly tanky as Exalted Plague Bearers, and their Gloom of Flies passive gives them the same 9 melee defense, but also gives them Terror, which for an infantry unit is exceedingly rare, plus they have regen from Festering Gate. They seem like an auto-include to me in pretty much any battle or game mode. They're that good, and Ku'gath himself got some huge buffs in 1.2, but the most important one is that he is now a Mortis engine, which means that Khorne and Slaanesh have a horrendous time trying to deal with him. Obviously, those are melee-only factions, and the only way to kill him is to kill his army, which means you have to fight a blob fight around an epically powerful and tanky Mortis with the best AoE heal in the series. Not quite as big an issue in domination, but hugely problematic for them in land battles when there's no clear objective. So yeah, he is scary as well he should be, and the Piercing Bolts of Burning are already raining down as they enter the gloomy forest. So at the start of this match, we're going to see the Plague Drones try to get aggressive and try to snipe out those Man-Eater pistols. The problem with that is the Man-Eaters have much longer range, and the Death's Heads have to be perched right on top if they want to get some good shots in. If they do that, they're exposing themselves to the knife throws from those Noblar Trappers, and the Man-Eater pistols can outshoot them anyway. You really want to be using those against single targets, like Greasus would be a great example of a target where they could get insane value really quickly if they're able to sit right on top and shoot in. But Ogres have a lot of shooting, so it's less efficient versus them than it would be against someone like Khorne or Slaanesh, as long as you can clear out those Furies out of the sky first. Plague Drones are a unit that requires air superiority and the elimination of enemy ranged assets before they can become brutally effective, which is why they're kind of a niche pick in general. Like I said, finicky on a macro scale and down to the practical application on the battlefield. They did have a fleshy abundance sent their way, but the sustained fire from the Powder Guts is making their lives miserable. That was maybe the worst fireball I've ever seen. No idea where that was going. That was sent towards the Plague Drones, and it just said, you know what, I don't really have any desire to hit these gorgeous creatures, which, to be fair, they are quite sexual. Nothing gets me randier than a big, diseased fly that will eat my face. Man-Eaters need to back up. Plague Drones are going right in. They've had enough of this. Huge Piercing Bolts of Burning landing on top of Ku'gath, and here comes the Ogre Bull Charge straight down the hill. That's like Ray Lewis tackling like a 12-year-old who weighs 40 pounds. I mean, they're going flying down that hill. Impact of that charge, quite tumultuous, as it were. And the Festering Stooges will take the brunt of that. But they should be able to do well at sustained melee with regular Ogre Bulls. Quite literally an uphill battle for Ku'gath Plaguefather and the Poxmakers of Nurgle. Man-Eaters have retreated further up, and the Powder Gusts should be able to provide some nice range support. They're shooting into Ku'gath or into those Plague Drones, who I don't think they're too happy with how the Death's Heads are performing so far. I really think that one of those units should pull out and kind of provide some overwatch over Greasus or one of these other high-value SEMs just to fire in. But here comes the Fleshy Abundance. That should be an overcast, and yes, indeed, Greasus is going to bat for the Ogre Peoples, hitting at a cool 500 average. Just can't seem to ever take extra bases. Hits a triple, still on first base. Inside the park home run, still on first base. Starting to think he doesn't really actually like baseball, and is just here for the beer, hot dogs, and chicken wings, which, to be fair, I think is probably a lot of people in America. We got Plague Drones overhead, getting healed up by Fleshy Abundance, and that was a nice overcast. Hit both Plague Drone units and Ku'gath himself, and they're busting right through the center. Beast of Nurgle and Ku'gath using their mass to push through and get on top of Greasus, who will have to stand his ground, get his Scepter of Titans out for that bonus for large and extra weapon damage, and start fighting. Everyone has their price will be a really important anti-duel mechanic for Ku'gath. It's a great way to dumpster his stats and give Greasus a chance to chunk him down. Now, you cannot kill him by himself. You're not going to kill Ku'gath halfway through the battle almost ever, unless you have tons of ranged firepower. It's really about forcing out the early Fleshy Abundances, grinding down the rest of the army, then leaving him isolated on an island. That's the only time he's going to die is at the end. He'll usually be the last model on the field, or one of them remaining for Nurgle. Big issue for the Ogres, though, is that Iron Blaster has not been firing. The terrain, for whatever reason, is preventing it from shooting in. Now the Beast of Nurgle has broken all the way through and forced it back. So it's under a lot of pressure. It should easily be able to escape from a Beast of Nurgle. It's way faster, but it is not firing, and that is by far the best tool the Ogres have for forcing out early heals on Ku'gath and making those blobs start breaking down. Imperial Ogre Pirates holding the line as if their grog and dinner depends on it, and Ku'gath with the massive disrespect, dunking and nurgling in Greasus' face, popping pimples all over the Over Tyrant, and Greasus is over it. He's had enough. Time for the debuff to start kicking in, and for the Fire Belly to support with his fire damage, and maybe a Flaming Sword of Ruin, which is a super good spell versus Nurgle. Bypass their physical resist, weaken their healing effects. I don't believe anything on Nurgle's roster is weak to flame in the same way trolls are, or maybe they just changed the tooltip so it's harder to see. But regen and healing are both cut in half when on fire, and that is a Flaming Sword of Ruin, albeit a bit jankily. I believe that was meant to support Greasus himself and has just now made its way over. Beast of Nurgle still trying to hunt down the Iron Blaster, but the Fire Belly has words to say to him, and it was slowed by the Noblard traps, which made it difficult for the disgusting, noxious slug to make its way over to the Rhino and that cannon crew. He's moving around, trying to get some kind of angle to fire in on Ku'gath or any of these important SEMs on the Nurgle side, but that's like the first time I've seen it fire in the last 5 minutes. I've no idea why it's having such a difficult time, but it is continuing to move away from the cultists now, and that looks like a beast will crumble out. And every time I see these boys, like, you know their lore. You guys saw the video me and Invicta did. They're puppies with zero understanding of this cruel world, and they just want to play. Instead, greeted by fire and blood, which actually I think beasts are weak to flame, if I remember correctly. But now he's going to get sent back to the warp and turn into an evil rotfly with vengeance in his heart, while Ku'gath continues his dunking. I would love to see this dude play basketball. Free throw line dunk like Michael Jordan would make me very happy on his palanquin throne. You just know he has them bunnies, that Ku'gath's got them ups. Greasus might be in a bit of a precarious position at this point. Again, there's no way he's going to be able to deal enough damage to cut through all that healing without a ton of support. He needs that Iron Blaster to start doing something, and it is just continuing to drive circles around to try to get in a position to fire in. And finally, it might have gotten in a good spot. Good shot into the Beast of Nurgle from point blank range. It's going to be about 1,200 damage every time it fires, but a nice Curse of the Slug to slow him down and allow the beast to close the gap and further debuff his speed. And that is one of the most dangerous things about an Iron Blaster. It's an artillery piece that deals tremendous damage, but it also has heavy cavalry speed and a ton of mass. So even with the poison debuffs and Curse the Slug and Slime Trail and all that, the Iron Blaster should be able to create some space for itself. Flaming Sword of Ruin in the center. Plaguefather's Oration around Ku'gath. Greasus, realizing the predicament he's in, he is looking to retreat and give that Iron Blaster more time. The Plague Drones have closed down into the Man-Eaters, and the Powder Guts have activated their trap card. Adaptive Tactics, they're up into the 70s in terms of melee attack and melee defense. Meanwhile, we got Noblard Traps slowing down the Beast of Nurgle, giving the Iron Blaster more time to get close, and this is really where it shines. It can just sit 20 feet away, 30 feet away, and make sure that cannon spread, that shotgun spread, hits all the targets. Now, there might have been some friendly fire there. The downside of that, it has tons of penetration, so it probably went through the Rotflies and killed a few Man-Eaters, which is actually not ideal, considering how unbelievably tanky they are in melee with their adaptive tactics active. Which kind of leaves the Ogres in a catch-22, because this is what will happen if you don't kill the Rotflies off. They'll disengage and then come tie down the Iron Blaster, so it made sense to target them first. They're the only mobility left that Nurgle has, but you run the risk of blowing half your Man-Eater unit to Kingdom Come, and that's what happened there. Probably killed 3 or 4 models with that shotgun blast from close range. Greasus is back in. This time there's a piercing bolts of burning from the Fire Belly, and that could do a serious amount of damage, not just to Ku'gath, but also to Greasus. It's like those scenes in the movies where they're like, call in a fire mission on my position. But sir, you're too close to the blast. This is danger close, private. Do it, do it, do it. And Greasus is going to take a lot of damage from that piercing bolts of burning, but Ku'gath is down to about 2/3 HP. Powder Guts still lending their volleys to the chorus. Greasus trying desperately to get away from the big scary man as he throws Nurglings into his butthole. And the Iron Blaster attempting to escape from the remnants of those Plague Drones, but honestly probably has enough melee stats to finish them off, especially with a little bit of support from those Man-Eater pistols, which are trying their best to clear it off the Rhinox and allow the cannon to actually do something. Now, surprisingly, the cannon has decent damage value already from the few shots it's gotten into Ku'gath, but it has not made the impact we would like it to, and we'll see if that will change moving into the last stages of this battle. Firebelly beating down the other Beast of Nurgle, and now he'll have 2 Rotflies coming in their next life looking for vengeance, so protect your neck, keep your head on a swivel, swoogity swoogity. Rotflies will be coming for that Firebelly booty, and here comes Ku'gath downhill with Pestilent Decay, draining life from everything, just like Mortis engines tend to do, but he hasn't had the targets that he'd love to. He really loves the gigantic blobs around him of enemy melee infantry, high model count melee infantry, and there isn't going to be quite as much of that besides the Noblars themselves. Now, Greasus is getting shellacked by artillery bombardments from Ku'gath, and you can see that he wants to take Greasus in a duel. He knows that he'll beat him in a straight up fight now, but this is where it gets scary for Ku'gath too, because the Iron Blaster finally, after all this time, has unrestricted access to fire in to the Great Unclean One. Now the Firebelly is coming in, dropping Flaming Sword of Ruin. All the buffs, debuffs, eruptions, fire breaths, everything being sent Ku'gath's way. And very quickly, he will feel those scorching flames from the fire mouth. And, I mean, he was half HP a couple seconds ago, and now he's on slivers and about to crumble out. But Greasus is one hit from death and one final blow from the Rotfather, and just putting the cherry on top. I mean, that's just complete disrespect from the fetid Brewmaster. But I don't think that Ku'gath will be around for much longer either. Firebelly still attacking from behind. The Iron Blaster getting a point-blank shot, shotgun blast right into his gaping maw, and immediately afterwards, the Rotfather, the Great Unclean One, crumbles out and returns to Nurgle's Grand Garden. I love those little feetsies he plays when he attacks. When he's like, you can just give him a little kick. It's like, ugh, I'm gonna kick you. Ugh. Well, good night, sweet friends. Ku'gath is gone. He's dead. And the Firebelly has been an absolute freaking monster this entire game long. Tons of mass routing on the Ogre side, and only a handful of Powder Guts to stem the tide. But there's not much left for the Rotfather either. It's just the Festering Stooges which are regenning, and now they have to deal with the Flaming Damage Eruption, dropping my FPS into the teens. Gotta love it. And it looks like the Exalted Plague Bearers will crumble out, leave that cultist to mass rout due to army losses, and that should be your battle. Ogres will take it with only a handful of monstrous infantry remaining. And, of course, that Iron Blaster, which ended up being quite impactful at the end there. Good showing all around for the elite units on the Ogre side. The Powder Guts were amazing. They had over 3,000 damage value. The Firebelly had over 3,000 damage value. Ku'gath Plaguefather himself had close to 4,000, and that is low compared to what you'll get against Khorne and Slaanesh in your standard battle right now. Beastly. Iron Blaster, 3,000 damage value. Greasus got 2,300, so he pretty much exactly made his value back. And yeah, I think an overall decent strat from the Ogre side to deal with this particular Ku'gath army. Even the knife-throwing Noblard Trappers got decent damage value throwing into those Plague Drones. Nobblers themselves are crap, but they're meant to be. Just throw them in, let them do their thing, soak up some charges, soak up some phlegm bombardments, and let the real Ogres do the work and enjoy the spoils afterwards. But yeah, I'm very impressed with the ROR. The Powder Guts are an amazing unit. Maybe not necessarily always worth their cost at 1,900. That's pretty wild. It's a lot to pay. But for the Nurgle side, Festering Stooges, like I said, amazing unit. The Beast of Nurgle did not do well here. The Firebelly Horde countered them, killed both of them. Was used quite well in that battle. The Gate of Chaos with the Plague Bearer summon was useful, and Ku'gath was obviously a hard carrier. But in terms of the Plague Drones, like I said, finicky unit, you want to be camping on top of the high-value SDMs and using their AP Javelins, essentially, to chunk them down. But it's hard when you're up against something like the Powder Guts, Manator Pistols, or a Iron Blaster, because they'll shoot you out of the sky and completely zone you out. So you got to make sure you swarm the ranged troops and tie them down before you close in with the Plague Drones, because you won't win those trades, and I think we saw that here. Hope you guys enjoyed.